Hello, everyone out there in YouTube land. Well, this is the channel of Dre Z, and I am the original anti-Adventist. So I am here to basically cover a piece of information regarding the Seventh-Day Adventist cult. Many people don't know about this cult. You should, because Trump and his administration has a Seventh-Day Adventist called Ben Carlson. Now, what's interesting about these people is they are what I term a doomsday cult. And what a doomsday cult is, basically, is they preach the end of the world, and of course, they are the ones that will be persecuted toward the end of time before Jesus returns. And they're all various adherents. They believe what I go by is what is in black and white according to their own writings. So under belief 18, you know what? I am going to go to, there we go. This is the slide deck that I have prepared for you all. So I am going to go through the definition of a cult as laid out by Merriam-Webster. So Merriam-Webster defines cult under 4 bullets, basically 4 definitions. It's they have formal religious veneration for someone or something or some idea. It's a religion regarded as unorthodox or spurious, a system for the care of disease based on dogma. And to me, that doesn't sound actually so bad, but it is one of the definitions of a cult. The problem, I will cover this when we get to that slide. The last bullet point is great devotion to a person, idea, object. So let's move on to the next slide. Formal religious veneration. So the veneration of a person. So in their cult, they have this woman called Ellen G. White. She is known as a prophet. Now, here's what's funny. There's a lot of people who will say that nowhere does anyone call her a prophet. But according to belief number 18, they say she speaks with prophetic authority. Well, who speaks with prophetic authority but a prophet? But let's cover the definition of religious veneration. Respect, awe inspired by dignity, wisdom, dedication, or talent of a person. So she's like their big prophet, and as part of belief 18, it also states that because of her writings and her visions, they become the remnant church. In other words, the real church. They believe themselves to be the real one. Now, what makes Ellen G. White a prophet? This is kind of interesting. If you trace back to her childhood, she, as a kid, was hit in the head with a rock. It's arguable because they didn't have doctors, and the family couldn't actually afford a doctor, so she really never was diagnosed. But if you look at there's a book called Life Sketches that she wrote, and she describes all of her symptoms that she suffered through. And if you list out all the symptoms as she describes them, and you go to WebMD and look up the symptoms for brain damage, you're going to find out that pretty much all of her symptoms match up. So there's belief 18 right there. As a matter of fact, what I will do is I will bring the slide into large scale here. So the scriptures testify that one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit is prophecy. Prophecy. This gift is an identifying mark of the remnant church. Right? So I said already that the Seventh-day Adventists believe they're the remnant church. They're the real church. They're the ones who, in the end of days, will be persecuted, and the 144,000 will make their way to the holy city. Which, by the way, they don't believe they're going to heaven. They believe that the heavenly city is going to come down to earth. There's going to be like this quick war where the devil, after being stuck on earth for 1,000 years by himself and his angels, he's then going to, well, it's not him. Basically, the wicked dead are going to come to life. He's going to muster the troops, and the heavenly city is going to come down. They're going to march on it, and then there will be this big flame out of them and the world will be reborn. So anyways, that's the remnant part. They say, we believe it was manifested in the ministry of Ellen G. White. Her writings speak with prophetic authority. And okay, let's stop there. Prophetic authority. So who has prophetic authority? Well, prophets, of course. So, you know, they play this little cop-out that no one called her a prophet. Says, well, yeah, you did. According to Belief 18, you call her, you basically say she speaks with prophetic authority, and prophets speak with prophetic authority. She provides comfort, guidance, instruction, and correction to the church. So this is relevant. Now I'm going to bring the last line in here, and I'm going to tell you why this is relevant. They also make clear that the Bible is the standard by which all teaching and experience must be tested. So they're claiming, according that she passes biblical muster for being they call it messenger of God, but she's a prophet. I mean, if you read anything by her, she says a lot. An angel showed me, or Jesus spoke to me, and if you look that up, that's what prophets are there for. They you know, so you can quibble over a messenger of God or a prophet. It's a prophet. All right, so basically that you know, that last sentence in regards to the Bible, well, everyone knows the Bible is not the best book to base anything on, hence why there's thousands of denominations of Christianity based on it. So the reason Ellen G. White exists is because when you get into those situations where you could read a verse or a chapter, let's call it a chapter. What I don't like is, you know, and they're no different from any other Christian religion. They'll pick a verse and they'll hinge an entire thought based on the verse. But it's like you kind of have to read the chapter. The chapter is what the thought is about. Otherwise, you're going to have nothing but arguments. People saying, oh, verse something says this. It says, yeah, but there's a wider context involved. So anyways, you get into arguments. One person reads the Bible, interprets it one way. Someone, even within this denomination, they'll have people that argue with each other over what a passage reads. So hence comes Ellen G. White, the brain-damaged little girl who suffers epileptic seizures and comes out of the epileptic seizures, and this is basically what heaven says. All right, so she's put here to speak with prophetic authority, basically the messenger from God. Okay, fine, but it's a prophet. Provides comfort, guidance, instruction, and correction to the church. Guidance, instruction, and correction. So she's basically interpreting the Bible for its membership. Not only that, she goes into great detail over what everything reads. You can find any number of books that she's written about any number of different things. And she pretty much guides this denomination, church, whatever. I've had people make arguments over, oh, it's a denomination, not a church. And it's like, well, Seventh-Day Adventist Church. I mean, they kind of call it that. But, you know, whatever. I zip back and forth because sometimes it's better to just comply with someone's demand or whatever. So, okay, basically right there, formal religious veneration. Under Belief 18, that validates the definition. And for those of you who love to like argue over a lot of these facts, This comes straight from your own website. So this is Belief 18. It's on Adventist.org, and look it up. That's lifted directly from the website. All right, Unorthodox Religion. So basically, if you pay attention to these people long enough, you can almost see a couple of these scenes play out. So you have, the girl praying there to God. They actually do pray for end of days. I mean, they'll argue this one as well, but the founders of the Seventh-Day Adventist Church, all of them came from the Millerites. Now, the Millerites predicted the end of the world. They said Jesus would return in 1843. He didn't. Then there was I forget the date in 1844, which was early spring. That was the next prediction. It passed. And then they predicted in October, I think October 12th or 11th or whatever the case may be. And, of course, it didn't happen. So at that point, everyone kind of splintered apart. It broke into two groups. The Seventh-Day Adventists came from the smaller of the two groups, and there's the story, which Ellen G. White basically in early writings relates that this church in Washington, New Hampshire, they were having a ministry, whatever. And this woman called Rachel Oakes came up and basically said, hey, there's a commandment. It's the seventh, on the seventh day, Saturday, you're supposed to rest and keep it holy. And it kind of grew from there. I mean, one of the members said, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to follow the seventh day as the Sabbath. The minister finally got won over. Another guy, I forget his name off the top of my head, I think it was Hiram Edson, wrote a paper on it. A year later, Ellen G. White found that paper and decided that she would join this burgeoning belief system, not called Seventh-Day Adventists yet, but basically I think they started worshiping late 1844 into 1845, and she came in, and there was a lot of arguing going on over, what happens now to all these people that were one of the splinter groups. And she now all of a sudden starts having epileptic seizures that gets interpreted as visions. And then over time, she becomes the authority because, every time she gets into an epileptic seizure, next thing you know, there's an argument that has been solved because they accepted that those seizures somehow were the angels talking to her. All right, off to the next slide. So, yeah, what I failed to go over is the right part of that graphic that shows basically Satan with a pitchfork, and someone's on the ground there, and he says, you should have worshipped on Saturday. So this is what's unorthodox about their religion is seventh day is their day of worship. And they believe that if you do not worship on the seventh day, Saturday, you're basically lost. You don't go to hell because they don't believe in hell. A lot of them don't even know. This is what's funny. They have a whole set of belief systems that are written clearly in black and white that any one of them can study for themselves. And someone who is not a Seventh-day Adventist or whatever the case may be will say certain things that come straight from their own propaganda, and they will argue. They'll say, no, we believe in hell. It's like, no, you actually do. You don't believe in hell. And Ellen G. White says why. I'll save that for another live session and another slide deck. But then the next thing that they believe is if you are not part of this religion, then you suffer the second death. Here's the text. It comes from one of Ellen G. White's books called Testimonies for the Church. It's in volume 1, and it's the chapter titled Proper Observance of the Sabbath. And you can see there that not only under Mosaic law you suffer death if you don't comply with the seventh day. And what Ellen G. White here says is that's not only all, but they'll also suffer the second death. That is like another unique doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventists. Is when I spoke earlier about the end of the 1,000 years and the heavenly city comes down to earth and the evil dead are awoken, Satan rallies them, they march on the city, and this wall of flame destroys them and the earth. That's the second death. Although, what I find kind of odd is if the people were dead, why resurrect them to put them to death forever? I mean, that makes no sense to me. But that's the spurious part of the religion. So that's Seventh-day Adventists. They are vegetarians. Some of them go off, as a matter of fact, some of them go off into weird land with this, and they go almost vegan-like. So basically, they're vegetarians. They don't eat meat. They don't believe. In fact, you would say, well, that's kind of a cool thing, but you go deeper. Once again, you go to Ellen G. White, and she believes if you eat meat, it's a way for Satan to gain access to your consciousness. Just like, she's against drugs, which is, not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But then she talks about like tea and coffee are one of those stimulants that opens the mind up for Satan to enter. So this is part of the disease dogma by the Promulgator, who in this case is Ellen G. White. So let's go on to the next slide. Yeah, okay, sorry. So I did make a slide on this. So disease dogma set forth by the Promulgator. So, basically they're against Juan Valdez. This comes from, so if you look at that quote there, Satan's taking the world captive through the use of liquor, tobacco, tea, and coffee. So this is, once again, a lot of Adventists don't even know that this text exists either. This comes from her book, Counsels for the Church. It's in chapter 16, and the chapter is titled, Keep Clear God's Connection with Man. Tea and coffee don't nourish the system. And the title sounds okay. It's other than the God's connection being part of this, but nourish the system, that's fine. But this is almost like a chi-like thought, which once again you could think, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Qigong is a valid, but it's not a belief system. It's more like it's the way. It's like Tao. It's a Taoist way of, but she's applied it as a belief, as part of a religion. All right, so the last bullet point involved is great devotion to a person, movement, or work. So once again, the belief system, belief number 18, says that she is their prophet. So that would make her devotion. Now, here's the weird thing, though. A lot of them don't even read Ellen G. White. They have a problem with a lot of her writings because they become inconvenient this day and age. So it's kind of simpler to just sort of reject her and say, well, I'm going to read the Bible. It says, except you're back to square one. And your whole identity is sort of set up based on Ellen G. White. So if you reject her, you're no longer the remnant church, because your beliefs 18 says specifically that's why you're the remnant church, is because of the ministry of Ellen G. White. And this is so to basically wrap things up here, they're a cult. They have fulfilled the four definitions laid out by Merriam-Webster for being a cult. And a lot of it surrounds Ellen G. White, makes two of the four definitions come true. And like I've said, I hinted at earlier, it really doesn't matter because they're unaware or don't even follow her preachings anyways. However, in order to determine a belief system, you have to go by what's in writing. And what's in writing from this cult is Ellen G. White's writings. So they put themselves in a very odd quandary when they do this. So anyways, I am going to draw this to a close. This is my first live session. So what I did try to do was I created a slide deck to keep me on track, because I tend to wander off, and I, even with a slide deck in front of me, I did kind of wander off trail here and there. But that is basically my position. It's on the Seventh-Day Adventists being a cult. And to those of you who joined and watched this, thank you very much. Thanks for enduring all of this. You have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on another broadcast. I will try to do this fairly regularly, so at some point somebody will ask me questions, and I don't profess to know everything. And the reason actually I take this on is I used to be one of these people. I spent 12 years in their primary, secondary educational system, so I was heavily indoctrinated. When I was baptized, the bulk of the church still pushed Ellen G. White. So, everything belief system-wise you could find in her writings. Because like I said at the beginning of this, the Bible as basing a belief system is hugely flawed. And if you were to track back the origins of the Bible, you would kind of see why it is a problem book. So and I'll actually do a live on this, but to boil it out, my problem with the Bible is, even if you assume that all the raw material is the Word of God, word for word, the problem is there was the Council of Nicaea, which Emperor Constantine kicked off, who was a pagan emperor at the time. This movement of Christianity was becoming large, so he said, why don't we do a book for them which lays out their beliefs? And there's all these like old wives' tales or urban myths. One of the urban myths that's one of my favorite is, there were all these scribes. There was a bunch of them, I forget the number, but they were arguing incessantly over what should be in the Bible, which means they were going to leave out some raw material. So he got us disgusted, Constantine, and one day he goes up there, he picks up all the scrolls, throws them on a table, and some of course fall off, and he says, whatever's on the table there, that's what's going to be in this Bible. So once again, that's kind of an urban myth. Who knows if it's accurate or not, but that to me is part of the problem of the Bible. And the fact that you have thousands of denominations based on this one book it should occur to just about anyone that there's a problem with this book if it results in all of these thousands of different interpretations. And you also, if you track back and realize, well, it was translated into English, and we couldn't even leave it at that. Even after it was translated into English, there were so many different versions of it. By the way, the Seventh-Day Adventists use the King James Version. I've heard there's a version that they wrote which matches more closely up to what Ellen G. White wrote, but they go back and forth on that one. They say, well, it was someone to get a degree in theology. That was part of what he did, and we don't actually believe in that Bible. We still go by the King James Version. Personally, and this is just a feeling, after having been in this thing, I can't believe that they would go from the King James Version to what's it called, the Clear Word Bible? I forget the name of it, but I find it hard to believe that they would flip the Bible that they would use. So that's my 2 cents. I might make this a topic for another live session, but I am going to wrap it up because I finished the slide deck and basically made my case that they are a cult according to Merriam-Webster's definition. I took each definition and I covered how Seventh-day Adventists qualify. Well, you guys have a good day, and goodbye.